everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made with some Shimmerz paints and also papers and embellishments. For this layout, I'm using the April Color Kitz collection. As I often do, I started off this layout with a piece of thick white cardstock. I use 120-pound paper. And before I started working with it, I coated it with some Liquitex gesso. Now I'm going to create my background using some Shimmerz paints. I'm going to use two different shades of yellow. I use a Coloringz called Sunny Side Up. That's the first paint that I applied to the background. And I'm also going to use a Shimmerz called Bumbly Bee. I start off with the Sunny Side Up. I use the packaging technique to apply that color to the background. And now I'm adding a whole bunch of splatters. I love the look of splatters. Whenever I add splatters, I try to make a little halo of splatters all around the outside edge of wherever I added the color. That's where I think the splatters are the most noticeable. And then I think it also adds a transition area from the area of kind of solid color to the white area. And I also like the random look of splatters. So needless to say, I add a lot of splatters in both of the colors. Now I'm adding that second shade of yellow, which is a Shimmerz called Bumbly Bee. Once again, I'm using the packaging technique. I'm putting a little bit of color on the packaging and then adding a little bit of water to help me move the color around. Just like in the name of this type of paint, which is Shimmerz, there is a lot of shimmer to the paint, which I really enjoy adding to my layouts. And then, as I had mentioned, once again, I'm adding quite a few splatters of this color too. After adding the splatters, I noticed I had a little bit of paint left on the plastic, so I decided to add that to a spot that didn't have a lot of paint on it. My next step is adding some modeling paste through a stencil. I'm using a stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. It's called Mini Cherry Blossoms. This is a stencil that I use all the time because I like the way the flowers on it are very petite, and I also like the way when you turn it in different directions, it makes the stenciling look a little bit different. For the modeling paste or texture paste, I use a combination of thick body acrylic white paint and Ranger texture paste. The white paint helps the paste look a little bit more opaque white. The Ranger texture paste is a little bit more translucent than most modeling pastes, so I really like to add the white paint to make it a little bit more solid. Now, something that I think is really important is waiting for the background to be dry. The longer that you wait, I have found, the less of the color is absorbed by the modeling paste. If your background is yellow and it's not completely dry, you might find that the modeling paste turns a little bit yellow from the modeling paste, picking up some of that color from the background. I honestly don't think it makes a huge difference if the modeling paste doesn't stay totally white, but I just wanted to let you know what could happen. Before I put down the modeling paste, I will often run my background through my laminator, not with any laminating film, just to flatten it out a little bit. And I make sure that the background is completely dry before I put it through the laminator, because I've had some disasters in the past where I haven't waited for it to dry. I'm adding a little bit more stenciling with another stencil. This is a Tim Holtz stencil. I think it's called Dot Fade, and I use this stencil regularly. I love this stencil too, and I like the combination of the two stencils. I like those really, really tiny dots next to the slightly larger flowers. Just something about those two stencils I think makes a nice look. I went back in with the flower stencil a little bit more, and now I'm using some of my Coloringz in Sunny Side Up to add a few more splatters all around the edge. And then there was one spot on the left that I thought looked a little bit too white, so I added a little bit of color to that spot. I also wanted to add a couple of spots of black. I knew that there were going to be some embellishments that had black on them, so I thought it would be nice to add just some very faint touches of black splatters. I just very lightly tapped my scissors against the base of the straw, and that helps to keep the splatters rather tiny. The colors in this kit are very bright and beautiful. I wanted to include this piece of paper because it has so many of the colors from this collection and I thought that that would look nice all around the edge of the layout. The pattern paper is going to be all along the outer edge, and then I also include a piece of blue cardstock from my stash. I make that smaller than the striped pattern paper, and then I cut down my mixed media background, and that of course is going to go on top of those two edges. I use a piece of pattern paper from my stash that I have had for many years. I know that I won't be using it to make a layout, and I mount everything on that piece of paper. I find it much easier to do that than to try to layer the gutted pieces of paper without having something to attach them to. I used to try to just attach the gutted pieces of paper together, and sometimes it would be a bit of a disaster. So this really helps me to keep all of those papers flat. I use a lot of adhesive to attach my mixed media background down. It helps if the paper is warping a little bit to have a lot of adhesive. If the paper is warping a lot, it will just cause the other papers to warp. So that's why I always like to flatten it in my laminator. So I switched the photo that I was going to use. I used a different photo to plan out my mixed media. It was a horizontal photo that you may have seen at the beginning of the video. I've been trying to scrapbook that picture for so long. I absolutely love it. But for this layout, I like the way the colors in this picture went with the colors in my papers and embellishments better. So I decided to go with this particular photograph. And this is a picture of my daughter, Julia. She's the one on the left with her best friend, Kathleen. They were going to prom together. I'm pretty sure this was at Kathleen's house right before the prom. And they were cute. They took a lot of pictures together. They have been doing a lot of things together all through high school. And it's nice that my daughter has such a great friend. I matted my photo twice, first on some thick white cardstock and then again on that same piece of blue cardstock that I used along the border of the layout. And now I'm working with the die cuts. There were just some gorgeous flowers. I love all of these bright different colors, and I'm going to use not every last one, but most of them on this layout. I decided I was going to put them in rainbow order with the pink on the left and then the yellow in the center and the blue on the right. I know not everybody likes dimension, but I like a little bit of dimension or a lot of dimension sometimes on my pages. And for this layout, I'm just using a little bit. I'm popping up pretty much every other flower. I have the yellow one popped up on some of the foam, and then I have the second blue one or the middle blue one popped up, and then also that slightly brighter pink flower popped up on some foam. It just makes it look a little bit more realistic to me. If you've watched my videos, you may know that I really like to have the option to move things around initially. Eventually, I don't mind gluing everything down permanently, but I like to have the opportunity to try different configurations and placement of all of the embellishments. So I use some ATG adhesive on the back of all of the flowers. The ones that have foam won't be stuck down permanently. Eventually, those flowers are going to fall off if I don't use some wet glue to adhere that foam to the layout permanently. So for right now, it's going to work out, but later on, I have to add some extra glue, but I will do that off camera. I just wanted to let you know that that's something that you have to do so that you don't have all your flowers falling off your layout later on. I just love these bright, springy images. I tried to keep all of the pink in one line and then all of the blue together. However, with the sun, I wasn't able to keep that in line with the yellow flowers, but I decided it was important to put the sun to the left of that pink hot air balloon. There were quite a few loose leaves in the embellishment pack, and as soon as I started adding those leaves to the layout, I felt like the whole thing kind of started to come alive because I love the combination of that green with all of the other colors on the layout. I added quite a few leaves to this kind of half circle of flowers. Later on, I do a little bit of rearranging because I felt that the leaves were too evenly spaced. Whenever I'm adding a lot of the same embellishment, and I think it usually comes up when it's leaves, I don't want there to be the same distance between all of them. I want to have some smaller gaps between them and some bigger gaps. I think that makes it look a lot more interesting. I added a few more embellishments. On the left-hand side, I added a flower. I'm also adding a sentiment that says, "Together is better." I thought that was perfect for this layout. And then I used one of the sentiments that's on strips. I cut this one out that says Picture Perfect because I really liked that it was this really pretty color of pink. And then I wasn't sure where I was going to place it. At first, I was going to put it on the left and pair it with the Together is Better sentiment, but then I changed my mind about that. I also added this really cool pink tree. I love it. And then I put a flower right next to the tree. And now I'm using my adhesive, my ATG adhesive, and I'm attaching down all of those elements. For the hot air balloon, I definitely wanted to pop that up on some foam, give it a little bit more dimension. I also added some cardstock to the sentiment that I have on the page and then use some foam to pop that up as well. The reason that I reinforced the Together is Better with some cardstock and not any of the other embellishments is because it's a large flat surface. Although now looking at the hot air balloon, that one's pretty large too. But the reason for reinforcing the embellishments is because when you put some foam on them, they can sometimes bend a little bit over time. I definitely don't want that to happen, so that's why I add some extra cardstock to some of the embellishments. I added a birdhouse on the right-hand side. I used some foam for that. And I'm also adding these two really cute dragonflies. I like the way one's a little bigger and one's a little smaller. And I use a really thin piece of foam for those embellishments. Whenever I am adding dimension to something on my page that's very tiny or very thin, I try to use the white foam. That way, if you are able to see the foam, it won't be super noticeable. Some of the foam colors are very bright, so I will usually try to save my white foam for occasions like these. Now I'm adding some thickers to the layout. I happen to have these thickers that I thought matched in so nicely with the colors. These are some Dear Lizzy thickers from a collection called Ooh La La. These are probably pretty old because my daughter bought them for me at a thrift store. She only paid $1 for them and they were brand new. I was very happy to have those on hand. Thank you, Danielle. I was planning on calling the layout Best Friends. I wasn't sure how I was going to write the word best yet. In the meantime, I decided to add some photo corners. I love to use my EK Success scalloped photo corner punch to punch out these photo corners out of the pattern paper and the cardstock that I already have on the layout. I layered the photo corners that I punched out of the pattern paper on top of the solid blue ones. I thought that would give them a little bit more definition. You'd be able to see the pattern paper photo corners a little bit better. In the kit this month, we received some really cute dots. Of course, they coordinated perfectly with the collection. I put flower dots to the left of the sentiment, Together is Better. And then I used my ATG adhesive to attach all of those leaves down to the layout. So I was trying to think of where I could put that sentiment, Picture Perfect. And then I was also trying to think what letters to use for the word best for the title Best Friends. And then it dawned on me that I could just call the layout Picture Perfect Friends. So I decided to add that sentiment on top of the thickers title. I popped it up on some foam. And then I also added these really cute little bees down by the flowers. Once again, trying to keep the yellow bees near the yellow flowers. I love adding jewels to my layouts and I can't resist adding jewels to the centers of flowers. I didn't want to add any colored jewels to the centers of the flowers. I thought that clear ones might look a little bit better. I found that I had two jewels that were the right size. One of them was a little bit of a frosted looking jewel and the other one was a little shinier and it had a little bit of texture to the center. So I used a combination of those two jewels on the flowers. I tried out two different sizes of yellow enamel dots on each of the photo corners. I decided I liked the slightly larger one a little bit better, so I added two of that size. And then I used some very tiny pink enamel dots from my stash, and I added those to the hot air balloon. I used my scissors to help me position them. And then to the sentiment Picture Perfect, which is now part of the title, I added some very tiny rhinestones to go along with the jewels at the bottom of the page. And that is the very last touch. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much, my friends, for taking the time to watch this video. I really hope that you got something from it. When you place an order with Shimmerz Paints, if you use my name in the comments, you'll receive a free gift with your order. In the description box, I always include a link to the Shimmerz website and also to this month's Color Kitz collection. I think the Color Kits are a great way to try out different Shimmerz paints and then have matching embellishments and pattern papers to go along with them. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.